Hey everybody, welcome into the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. It is nearly the end of spring, but we've got one more practice report to go. It is brought to you by Byers Auto. That is Tim May and Spencer Holbrook. I am Austin Ward. Saturday at noon in the Horseshoe, it all comes to a close, so that will be a rapid reaction. So we're out of practice reports, camp over. Going to be some real tackling on Saturday. I think that was the main takeaway from the format, Tim.
Yep.
It's going to be offense, defense. They're not going to jumble up with the draft and scarlet and gray and shuttle people from one sideline to the other. So it'll be it'll look a lot more like a practice, but in that way, it'll be a lot more informative of what the Buckeyes really look like.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons they're not going to do that is Ryan Day alluded when he spoke with us today is that they don't have enough competent offensive linemen to split it up into two teams and to have enough of 5 on one side, 5 on the other, and maybe with a backup or two. So that's concerning to a certain extent coming out of the spring. You know, with Josh Fryer having to miss the spring and these other guys not accelerating like they thought they should, that is a concern compared to a year ago. But yeah, he's got he said they're going to start thud, then ramp it up to some full-time tackling, and we'll see how long that lasts. But you're still going to see a lot of players trying to make their name out there and assert themselves, let's say, going into the summer.
I would say that it's going to be reminiscent of the Student Appreciation Day, where when it was 1v1s, there was
every day.
There was a lot of thudding going on. There's not a lot of tackling. Then
Yeah.
the 2s, they started tackling a little more. You get the 3s out there, and they're just hitting. They're just tackling.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what you're going to see a lot in this spring game. I guess if you want to call it a spring game, since they're not splitting
Scrimmage.
teams up. But to see guys tackle, to see like C.J. Hicks and Gabe Powers get out there and tackle in live reps, to see different guys, that we haven't really got. Caden Curry get to hit some guys and see how physical they really are in a game setting. I think that's important.
Oh.
And it's not just, it's not going to be against the ones. It's not going to be against, some of the best players in the country, but it is going to be reps that are very valuable for these guys, especially the freshmen getting their first action in a live game setting, live bullets flying, 50,000 people out there.
Yeah, that thud part will be useful because Ohio State will want to use that 15th day to make sure that CJ Stroud gets some work, but you don't want him around there with a bunch of live flying bullets, even if the quarterbacks are off limits. You don't want the defensive line to have that mentality that they're really trying to get home, and so you want him out there. Josh Proctor, you want to get him and Cameron Brown some reps, where you still don't necessarily want them tackling guys to the ground and pushing it and risking injury at this point. So you want to make sure that, I think it's not so that just everybody in the Horseshoe, 50, 60, 70,000 people get a look at the starters, so much as Jim Knowles gets one more look and one more glance at them on tape and can start to project more. Is Proctor in that right role as the bandit? Does that fit him the best?
Coach Kevin Wilson
wants to come make an appearance out here. He's excited for the end of camp as well. So I think that's part of it. And as Spencer said, then you transition to guys that need a more thorough evaluation. And that comes when you're competing for a second team role or a true freshman getting your first opportunity maybe in the Horseshoe. So, but that part of it will all be fun because there's a lot of intriguing one-on-one matchups that you can get and learn from once you start digging into those next level guys.
Yeah, and for decades now, the spring game hasn't been a true spring game in many respects because you just haven't had the numbers. Even with 85 guys on scholarship, and some guys still, like you talked about, still hobbling a little bit, coming back from postseason surgeries, things like that, injuries from last year. You don't want to throw all caution to the wind. What I'm always interested in the spring, though, is who's going to flash. I think a guy who has a chance to flash on Saturday, for example, is Evan Pryor. I mean, there's a guy you're hearing really good things about. Of course, we never know who's going to play until the day, for the most part in the spring game. But there's, for example, a guy, Joe Royer. Is he going to look like that bona fide tight end they really need? Cade Stover. Are we going to see depth there at the tight end position, which was probably the most concerning of any position on the offense? I'm talking about just who the starter is. Is he going to be that capable guy? Because I think across the board on the offensive line, their starters are bona fide. But that's what I'm going to keep an eye on. Of course, you're going to be watching the defense, see if somebody makes a big play or 3.
And it goes back to the one-on-ones like you talked about. You want to see Evan Pryor in a one-on-one out of the backfield catching a pass against one of those linebackers or a safety or a nickel, whoever's defending him. You want to see Kai Stokes try to defend when a slot receiver crosses into that deep part of the field. You want to see Joe Royer try to match up on a linebacker and get free and catch a couple passes. And that's the kind of stuff where you can start to formulate, who's making real moves in the spring. I know that there's not a lot to draw from a spring game, but some of those one-on-one battles, they're going to be competitive. These guys are as competitive as
sure.
human beings can be. And so when you put them in a stadium with 60,000, 70,000 people, like you said, those one-on-ones are where you learn a lot. And so Jordan Hancock, J.K. Johnson, Jaden Ballard, a couple other names where if they're in a one-on-one, I'm going to be glued to that matchup because I want to see exactly how it unfolds.
And I think that this will be more educational and informative than, shuttling back and forth where you wound up accidentally getting Chris Olave on Demario McCall. Like,
Yeah.
we're not going to learn a ton in that situation, but when you're sticking with offense and defense, and in most cases, then you're going to start lining up against guys who are in similar spots in the pecking order. Well, that's when you do start to learn who's separating, who's on the rise, who's getting the best of that matchup. Now, it is still one day.
Yeah.
You have to keep that part in mind that whatever happens on Saturday doesn't necessarily guarantee anything for the summer or heading into August, but it is.
We found that out the hard way.
That's right.
That's
many times we've come across that, and I think Torrance Gibson, for example, would be the one that immediately comes to mind for me.
Yeah, Bam Childress.
Childress,
he was the 3 year in a row MVP of the spring game, and they never figured out how to use him in a real game. But,
but that part of it, so you're going to get a good snapshot of where they are right now at the end of April, which is meaningful because depending on what time they're out there, that might tell you something as well.
And from a surprise standpoint, last year, I was impressed by how Kyle McCord, having been on campus for 3 months, ran the offense in the second half. I thought he had a better overall spring game than C.J. Stroud did, but he had more opportunities, But there was a semi. Let's call it this, a semi-bona fide quarterback battle going on this time a year ago. Agreed? With Jack Miller and
it wasn't officially decided.
Right. It wasn't officially decided. This year it's officially decided. It's like I asked Ryan, I said, it's almost stacked the way you want it. A guy that's a Heisman finalist. You got Quinn Temple walking across here. You got a guy.
All the legends are out because the coaches clinic is tonight.
Exactly. But you got a guy that was a Heisman finalist last year at quarterback. You got a guy that started and won a game last year, Kyle McCord, when C.J. Stroud was letting his shoulder rest, and then you've got this young, promising freshman, Devin Brown, who's just been on campus for 3 months. But we got to watch him the other day. When he got his feet under him, he played pretty well in that little student appreciation day. So I'm really curious to watch them. Like Ryan said, just run the offense, man. Run the play. Get them into the right blocking scheme, et cetera, and see where it goes. And but there's no drama there as far as the quarterback goes. Agreed?
No, yeah, but you still want to see, especially in Devin Brown's case, when the threes are out there, there's going to be some live bullets in front of him. He's not going to take any hits because you can't afford to have a quarterback get injured. But everything around him will be live.
Based on what Ryan said about the offensive line today,
especially being on the turf in there and having all those people around. I keep going back to that 60 or 70,000 people, however many decide to show up. That's important for some of these young guys. And I think it's just as important for Devin Brown, who hasn't been in that kind of setting. He's the #1 overall player in the country for his class, according to our service. And you have no idea what he looks like in front of 60 or 70,000 people. That's going to be huge. Live bullets flying in front of him, a lot of people watching him, a lot of good weapons around him. He's going to have some freshman receivers to throw to. How does he handle it all? I'm just as curious as everybody because we know how Kyle McCord handles it. He was already in front of 90,000 people in a sold out, or not sold out, but I think it was 75,000 people at that Akron game, at night game. And still, it's Akron, but there was some pressure there. You want to know how Devin Brown responds to that.
Who's going to steal the show on Saturday, Tim?
I think Evan Pryor already named. I think he has a shot. I think Jaden Ballard has a shot. Just guys you haven't talked much about because we already know about stealing the show for me is somebody who pops up that you haven't seen a lot of. Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to have a hell of a year. And then defensively, J.K. Johnson, one of those guys on the corners is going to have a game. And one of those safeties, the way they're playing safeties right now, you got to figure out some safety is going to pop up and go. Like Kim Martinez is a guy I've got my eye on because I think this guy's a tremendous athlete. They've got to figure out a way to get him on the field. Obviously, they did in the Rose Bowl. But there's a guy, for example, I'm going to be watching closely.
Ryan Day said in the press conference he wants to see guys flying around. There's no better example of somebody who's going to play a lot and fly around than Kai Stokes.
Yeah.
A safety who has a chance to, get in a lot of action as one of the freshmen who needs a lot of game reps because we just haven't seen him very much. I think he's got a chance to really start to creep up I know, like you said, it's just one day, but if you put, a special performance on and you're a guy who is already a little bit on the rise, you got a chance to maybe crack the 2 deep. I'm not saying he's going to crack the starting lineup because that just looks very almost impossible with the guys in front of him, but that 2 deep is wide open behind the starters.
Yeah.
Kai Stokes has a chance, and then I'm going to go my guy. I think I've named myself the president of the Keon Gray's fan club.
Oh, really? I like it. I like it.
Self-appointed
Hey,
role.
the Student Appreciation Day, man.
Yeah, a freshman receiver who is,
You
again,
got prior knowledge there.
yeah, is going to be on the field a lot. He's got a great personality. Ohio State fans are going to love getting to know him the next 3 or 4 years. And he's just a guy who can make plays, and he gets open. He got open in the All-American game against 5-star cornerbacks that were trying to defend him. He gets open in practice. He's a guy who just has a knack for getting open. And, there's another receiver who's leaving the program right now who had a knack for getting open, was always open. And so I don't want to put
Only
that,
one?
I don't want to put that Chris Olave comparison on him, but you watch him in practice wearing that 17 as a true freshman. I think he's got a chance to do some pretty good things on Saturday.
I agree with that one.
I've seen enough of these to know what's probably
We
going to
didn't
happen.
leave you anybody.
No, you left me on a tee, Tim. I'm ready to smash this
hit it, man.
down the fairway. The defensive ends, there's more depth on the defensive line than there is on the offensive line.
Yes.
That is an objective fact. And the ceiling for those guys, especially if your twos include some combination of Zach Harrison or JT Tuimoloau or Javonte John Baptiste, however you rotate through, Jack Sawyer, Mitchell Melton. I'm sorry.
Monsters of the Midway.
They're going to win. So I think back to those famous ones with Adolphus Washington and Noah Spence or Jack Sawyer just a
With
year
the tag
ago.
sacks.
It's easier.
Yeah.
It's easier for them to steal that show. And I think that
I agree 100%.
there's a lot more trend in the right direction for that unit than there was the last couple of years, where we would talk about Harrison at this point, or the year before with Jonathan Cooper leading that unit, and could Tyreek Smith make that leap? And to be frank, they didn't get to that level of the Rushman standard that we expected. I think it's much more clear. And if your third string is Caden Curry and already has his black stripe off and is running around as a option at Jack or Leo or whatever, he's going to win those matchups too. He's more physically advanced than any kind of freshman or second-year offensive lineman they could put out there at tackle. So
that word I like to use about running backs? Caden Curry's got that wiggle.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got that little move where he goes by.
Berm tried to tell everybody. He tried.
No, if you watch him in those
it worked. He's at Ohio
All-American
State.
game practices,
Absolutely.
oh my goodness. But he does. I mean, the whole deal is don't get blocked and get in there, So I didn't mean, but I agree with you 100%. I'm glad we left that for you on the tee so you could hit it.
That was perfect. It was
Left-hander.
just right. And Saturday at noon, tee time for the Buckeyes, the last of the 15 practices in the spring. Lettermen Row, of course, will be there. Full coverage from start to finish. Thanks for joining us once again for the last practice report of spring. It's brought to you by Byers Auto. That's Tim May, Spencer Holbrook. I am Austin Ward. We will see you Saturday in the Horseshoe.